The United States and Iran appear on a destination for war. The collision course could be coming as soon as the next couple of months. And unless something is done to intersect that course, unless some changes happen either in Washington or in Tehran, the chance of war goes way, way up. And right now, that would serve the interests of no one. Now, you may have seen a couple of days ago, President Trump made raised a lot of eyes when he made the comment that either there's a deal gets done with Iran within the next couple of months, or he will bomb Iran. This is how Fox News put it a couple of days ago, March the 30th. Gary, if you can toss that full screen up there with the headline, that would be great. Yeah, that's the one there. So he threatens to bomb Iran unless they end their nuclear weapons program and begin talks. Now, the way this article is characterized, I think is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. According to this Fox News piece, and this is common, President Donald Trump's overtures via letter to Islamic Republic of Iran Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to jumpstart talks on dismantling Tehran's illicit nuclear weapons program were met with rejection by the theocratic state on Sunday following Trump's latest threat to the regime. Trump told NBC News on Saturday that, quote, if they don't make a deal, there will be bombing, he said. Now, first of all, that first part there that you see highlighted, that Trump wants to jumpstart talks on dismantling Tehran's illicit nuclear weapons program. Here's the problem. Tehran doesn't have an illicit nuclear weapons program. They have a nuclear power program. They have explicitly said they don't have a nuclear weapons program. They have said many times they don't intend to go to a nuclear weapons program, but they have the capacity to do that. And the CIA, the MI6 from Britain, they have been very clear in saying that, since 2003, there is no evidence that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. Now, the stated objective of Trump and all kinds of people, especially in Israel and the United States, is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. You've heard Trump many times say they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Many other people in the U.S. government say they're not going to be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, et cetera. But they don't have one. They don't have a program to have one. Our own intelligence sources say that they have not made the decision to go to a weapon. What the intelligence community has said is that the breakout time has been shrinking, that their capacity to have centrifuges, to reprocess weapons grade plutonium, et cetera, those things are all shrinking. They also have a delivery system. They have a very good and advancing ballistic missile capacity that could be retrofitted to hold a nuclear warhead, et cetera. Those things are true. But if our intent is to prevent that from happening, we seem to be going in the exact opposite direction. You've been hearing me talking about this for months, that if we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, then don't push them in that direction. It's counterproductive. Unless, of course, and we have to admit this is a possibility, there are those who want to push them into this direction. They want to make them go into get to a point where they feel like they have to, because the minute that anyone from the IAEA, and by the way, even from the JCPOA that Trump got out of in 2018, which was, of course, negotiated by Obama in 2015, part of that was done with Europe, and it requires and places for the opportunity for international weapons inspectors to be on site. They have monitoring equipment, et cetera. So even though we got out and have weakened it, some of it still remains. So we have eyes on the ground where we can still see if things are happening. You don't have to trust anybody for this kind of a deal, because they have very sensitive monitoring equipment that can monitor things all over the country, even areas where they aren't physically. It's, of course, possible to deceive the inspectors in some areas, and so it's not a foolproof deal, but it does give you eyes and it gives you capability. That's why the intelligence community continues to say they don't have a nuclear weapons yet, but the time that it would take for them to make that decision is short. So you can certainly understand human nature being what it is. There are some that seem to have motivation to want to push Iran into that position, because the minute that someone can say, we have evidence of it, look, they're going to a weapons program, or they've taken this action here, or we've detected this, these isotopes, or however they end up doing that, to measure it, to say, hey, they're doing it. Now then they feel justified to attack Iran. So certainly that threat exists there too. But let me just tell you, that would be a bad deal for us. It would be a bad deal for Israel, certainly be a bad deal for Iran, it would be a bad deal for the entire region. Because once that nuclear genie gets out of its bottle, now all of a sudden lots of pressure comes for others in the region to do it. Saudi Arabia, possibly Qatar, possibly Turkey. They may want to get their own nuclear arsenals because they don't want to be trusting anybody else. And they see if Iran can get one, and of course it's de facto that Israel has them. Jimmy Carter admitted that a number of years ago before he passed. So that's already a threat here. So the question is, if you want to lower tensions and if you want to prevent the possibility for any kind of nuclear escalation, this would seem to be the worst path to go. Don't put Iran in a position to where it feels the only way it can assure its security is to go to the very nuclear weapons you claim to want to prevent. And this is not something new for Trump, of course. He's been talking about this for a long time. But watch the progression here of what's been happening. Here's what he said on the 7th of March in pretty strong language.
We're down to final strokes with Iran. That's going to be an interesting time. And we'll see what happens. But we're down to the final moments. We're at final moments. You can't let them have a nuclear weapon. It's an interesting time in the history of the world. But we have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess. And hopefully we can have a peace deal. I'm not speaking out of strength or weakness. I'm just saying I'd rather see a peace deal than the other. But the other will solve the problem.
And the other will solve the problem. And of course, he's talking about military power. He thinks that if we don't get a negotiated deal to my liking, then we're going to go to military power. More on that in a second, but let me just talk about what the ramifications would be of that if you did. You won't succeed. By all estimates, the Iranians are well aware of their threat to even our best bunker buster bombs, and so they have gone to length to disperse its nuclear energy program out to different places, its research facilities, et cetera, and have put many of them deep underground that probably could survive that. They've spread them out to different areas. They have some of their better air defense systems around their most critical sites. So it's no guarantee you could get in. But even if you bomb, just the fact that when bombs start falling and you destroy things, number one, you have the possibility of nuclear fallout and leak to getting into the atmosphere, which would go anywhere, possibly even into some of our allies. We have troops in the region in a number of different locations. We could also be at risk depending on where that fallout might go. But even more fundamentally, once you let the war genie out of its bottle also, then you have the possibility for this going in areas you don't want. Because the idea that Iran has shown tremendous self-restraint out of weakness, by the way, not because they're some wise people, but just because they know that they're a position of weakness. And so, like when we assassinated Soleimani in 2020, when the Israelis were attacking, destroying the Iranian embassy, when the Israelis assassinated somebody in Tehran during a presidential inauguration, stuff, all of those acts of war, all those highly inflammable, but Iran's responses were very measured and limited after each one of them, so as not to get the ire of the United States and to get themselves into a full war. They wanted to do the minimum necessary to keep domestic tranquility, but not so much that it prompted to get into a full war. As long as that stays the dynamic, we can continue to deter them from taking any further actions. And that's very provocative action on our side, U.S. and Israel, literally lethal action against Iran. And so far, they have been remarkably constrained. That can continue on as long as we don't go over the top. We also have some limitations. If we go too far in what we do to Iran, then their self-restraint will go away because they'll say there's an existential threat now. If Iran thought it was just going to be painful, like the assassination, like the attack on its embassy, like the assassination in its capital city, then they say, okay, well, we don't want any more of that to happen, so we have to do a little something, but it could get a lot worse, so let's make sure it doesn't. But if you take that off the table, and now Iran doesn't have that constraint because they think now then it's not just a painful hit here, you could literally be coming after us like you did with Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, where you assassinated all their top leadership. Now then they may say, okay, this is an existential threat. Apparently Hezbollah had, allegedly anyway, 150,000 of these rockets and missiles, some of which were highly capable. And yet they never used them en masse. Israel could have been swamped with these missiles, but they never used them. Hassan Nasrallah never ordered them. He kept them in their launch tubes, and then he was assassinated. And all of his, many of his senior leaders were all assassinated. So they never used this capability, if they indeed had it. Iran is now looking at that same situation, and they don't seem to be poised to do that. If they come under existential threat, they may use some of their power, and they have a lot more than the Hezbollah was rumored to have. I mean, they have speedboats, they have a navy, they have the ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is caused catastrophic financial problems all across the world, not just the United States or the Middle East, but the ramifications because of the flow of oil through the Gulf of Hormuz, et cetera. All of those things could be possible, and of course, their missiles force is quite robust. Many of our troops are definitely at risk in the area. I've told you many times, Iran has pointed that out. We know where your troops are. We know how vulnerable they are. They could not stop what we would bring on top of that. Don't put Iran into a position to where, out of fear and recognize in military inferiority, that they use the few strong cards they do have to unleash. And that's something that if they feel it's an existential threat, they may end up going down to. Now, that was a previous one on Trump, was from the 7th of March. Here he was on the 28th of March, 2 days before that comment about bombing Iran, when he said this.
Iran is very high on my list of things to watch. And as you probably know, I sent them a letter just recently. And I said, you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other. And we're going to either have to talk and talk it out, or very bad things are going to happen to Iran. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. My big preference, and I don't say this through strength or weakness, my big preference is we work it out with Iran. But if we don't work it out, bad things are going to happen to Iran.
Okay, bad things are going to happen to Iran if they don't work it out. What is it you want to work out? What is the plan here? If your own intelligence sources are telling you they don't have a nuclear weapons program and that they haven't made a decision to go down that path, what is it you want to talk to them about? Because you want to talk them out of having a nuclear weapons program, but right now they don't have a nuclear weapons program. Seriously. So then what do you want to talk to them about? Do you want to have some sort of situation where you think you're going to negotiate with Iran to dismantle their nuclear power program? If that's the case, then that's a complete non-starter, because why would they do that? Because what you're essentially asking, and what has been reported in some of these some of the news reports about this letter he referred to that he sent to Iran, was basically a invitation to complete surrender. It says that they want to dismantle the entire infrastructure, the nuclear energy infrastructure. No ability to reprocess anything, no ability to store any kind of fuel rods or any of the other kinds of reprocessed facilities, and to dismantle their long-range missile program. Those are things crucial to their self-defense. No nation is going to, under pressure, say, let me just give away all the stuff that we have, all the things that we have which could be used to defend us against a much greater power. Obviously, I think I've told you in the recent past, that's what Libya tried to do in the early 2000s with the Bush administration, to much fanfare about, they got rid of their nuclear weapons program. They dismantled it. Yay, big victory. Oh, shoot, you don't have a nuclear weapons program. Now, all of a sudden, in a new administration under Obama, now Gaddafi was a bad guy, so we went after him. Of course, he had no good ballistic missile program. He had no nuclear program, so he had nothing to defend himself. He ends up being murdered in the street in the aftermath of all this air power that the U.S. joined in to get rid of him. That, believe me, that is key and high on the minds of all the Iranian leadership. They recognize they are a weaker power. They recognize that they can't stand up to the full power of the United States. Don't put them in a position, I keep saying this over and over, to where they feel like the only thing they can do to defend themselves is to have a nuclear weapons. And in fact, in terms of these negotiations and talk, we're going to get to that in just a second. But an Iranian scholar earlier today on, I can't remember what network it was on, we'll have it up in a second, but this guy's saying, look, you want us to have a negotiation, but you've got a really bad track record about the absence of trust. So I don't know how you're going to reach anything. Here's how he put it.
There was a deal. Trump withdrew, and not only withdrew from the deal illegally, he imposed the maximum pressure campaign, which they now say we will not negotiate directly with the United States under it, because It's a matter of principle. If you agree to negotiate directly with the U.S., you're legitimizing, so the argument here goes, the maximum pressure campaign, which is illegal as per the JCPOA, the 2231 Security Council resolution. So yes, they are distrustful with the Trump administration, with Trump himself. The man is unreliable. The way the Iranians look at him. Look at how he treats his own allies and client states. He makes a deal and then he reneges on it and pushes further. So the Iranians do not want to see themselves in such a position.
Yeah, and who's to blame them from their perspective? And listen, you don't have to like Iran. If you want to hate Iran, fine, for whatever your reasons are. But if you want something good from an outcome of a negotiation, the other side has to have some level of trust in what you're saying. Even if you're enemies, you've got to have some trust there. Look, the United States has some history with this. Remember in the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, you had the two sides on the verge of nuclear war. They hated each other, and there was obviously a great deal of distrust. The militaries were just antagonistic like crazy against each other. But yet the two leaders came to some understanding where they had some level of trust that the United States would get rid of the secret missiles that it had in Turkey in exchange for the Russians actually publicly getting rid of the missiles that were in Cuba. And that diffused the situation because both sides saw what was going on, but they trusted each other to do what they said. And of course, they verified it. Nobody just blindly trusts anybody, nor even in that situation. But they have to believe that that's going to happen. If when Kennedy agreed to get rid of the U.S. missiles that they had in Turkey, that we would do it. And they watched to see, and then it ended up happening. Problem solved. The risk of nuclear war was abated and then went away. That's the same thing that's going to be required here. If you want the Iranian side not to go to nuclear weapons, if you don't want any war, if you don't want things to escalate, then there has to be some trust. And right now, we don't have any trust, especially with Iran. Because he's right there. We got out of the JCPOA that the Obama administration had negotiated, along with a number of European allies. Everything went into effect. Both sides trust each other. Both sides were verifying things. Both sides got a little of what they wanted. The tensions had lowered. Then in comes Trump in 2018, and under various pressures, decides to abrogate that treaty and just unilaterally withdraw. But we didn't want them to stop doing the stuff that was required under the JCPOA. That was one of the perverse things of that. We got out of the nuclear deal, said we were going to negotiate a better one, but then got mad at Iran for breaking the terms of the JCPOA that we got out of. I mean, it didn't make any sense. It was illogical. And certainly the Iranians were angry about that because they say you want to keep the imposing tariffs and sanctions and other penalties on us, and you want us to continue to abide by these rules that you yourself now taken yourself out of. So it's you can't do it like that. No one is going to negotiate in a situation like that because it's all loss and no gain. And for the United States, it's all gain and no loss. So we have to change that dynamic if Trump thinks he's going to want to have some kind of a positive outcome here, because Iran is going to have trust rebuilt. And then we have to even figure out what are you going to ask? Are you asking something that Iran can't deliver on? See, Trump is not even saying, let's go back to the JCPOA or some new variant of it with his name on it, something like that, which is, all right, in exchange for this, we'll give you that. No, we're just saying that get rid of this or we'll bomb you. Folks, that's not a negotiation. That's not a discussion. That is an invitation to war, because you're putting the other side in a position to where they either abject surrender, and then in an effect or the results of that surrender is that they make their own national security weaker so that they invite further attack that could literally decapitate their country and destroy the regime. Who's going to do that? Because what then now you've done is you put Iran in a position to where either it takes the step that it says it didn't want to have a nuclear weapons program, or they take steps that are going to lead to the conclusion that they could be the next victims like the Libyans were, and that they would be the ones killed and they would have no power to do anything. There are very few people on this earth that would make that choice. I can't think of any, frankly. And according to what some of the Advisors to the Ayatollah Khomeini have said that there are none there either.
من فکر کنم یه اشتباه استراتژیکی داره میکنه امریکا. اگر سر مسئله هسته‌ای، یعنی ما هم گفتیم فتوا هست، هم زیر نظر آژانس کار میکنیم و به سمت سلاح نمیریم. اما اگه شما در مسئله هسته‌ای ایران کار اشتباهی بکنید، ایران رو مجبور میکنید برن به سمت این امر، چون باید از خودش دفاع کنه. با دست خودتون داره این کار رو میکنید.
So you see that's Ali Larijani, one of the advisors to the Ayatollah right now. I think he also used to be the foreign minister for Iran. Very experienced diplomat, been around for a long time. And listen, what he says is just self-evidently true. So the question is, what are we trying to accomplish here? Because Trump appears to be moving the United States down a path to where war is the only outcome. To where at some point Iran may, out of desperation, say, all right, make that jump. And of course, if they do that, what they're going to do is they're going to do it in such a way they're going to try to do it to where the IAEA can't detect it until it's a fait accompli, until all of a sudden one day there's a nuclear test underground somewhere in the Iranian desert. And then all of a sudden now they'll say, okay, we have a nuclear weapon. And if anybody tries to do anything now, we launch a nuclear missile at you. That's probably what they would try to do. Now, whether they could succeed at doing that, whether we could detect it, who knows? I don't have the technical expertise to understand how that would work. I'm not sure that anybody actually does. But that's the position we're putting them in. And then the question is going to be, what do you think is going to happen? Because this is not an isolation. If it was just isolation between the United States and Iran, or just the U.S. and Israel and Iran, there would be a real problem. But it's not an isolation. For example, the Russians have said in response to what Trump said there about his threatening to bomb Iran, Russia condemns these ultimatums because that's effectively what it is. And he warns that there could be catastrophic consequences if it happens. Now, understand, Iran is not just a country that Russia has some interest in. They have a military alliance with Iran. They get military equipment in the form of these drones, the Shahed drones that come out of Iran, which have been tremendously effective from the Russian side. And they're not at all about to let that go away. They're not going to give that up, and willing, not just passively stand by, especially while you're trying to work out a deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war in a way that's beneficial to the United States side, in a way that's least offensive to the Ukraine side. Now, why is Russia going to say also, yes, this is our ally in the region, and we're going to just do nothing while you sit there and possibly have a regime change operation, which would then affect our ability to continue to operate in our war here, which we consider an existential fight on our borders. So you see, there is no good path to this. This is not anything that has virtually any possibility of benefit to the United States. But it's also not legal, because I want to know, what is President Trump's play here? What does he even think he wants to accomplish? I just pointed out in detail that there's no logical reason to think that Iran would give in to this kind of pressure, that a new maximum pressure would have any better results than the last one did, which was catastrophic. It continued the whole time he did maximum pressure. It worsened the conditions between our relationship and increased the probability that there will be future conflict. And now I just showed you here the Russian component of that, which is tied to another American interest in the Middle East, or in Europe. You see that these things are all combined, and everything going down this path makes all those harder. It decreases our security in the Middle East, and it increases the chance that Russia quits playing ball with us and continues to go until they have a military victory here. And in the event that you go to war in Iran, let's just be clear on this. There's no end here. There's no easy victory. This is not Syria. This is not Libya, to where you can just launch a few airstrikes and a few cruise missiles, and then just, and they'll fall and they'll collapse or whatever. It's not going to happen that way. They have the ability to fight back, and it's a huge country. And there's a lot of division within Iran, but you start attacking another country, most of the time, almost all the time, it unifies them and bridges over those differences, and they come together. I mean, that's what happened in Ukraine. When Russia attacked, all these divergences and various political parties, they either were put asunder by the leader, or they came together into kind of one unified bloc for a long time. That's just how it works. I mean, even in the United States, that's how it worked. In the aftermath of 9/11, all these political differences we had vanished for a period of time. So that's not going to happen. And the chances of them getting a nuclear weapon, I mean, there's a chance that by doing this, they actually succeed. They somehow find a way to get under that radar and can do what their probably desperate hope is, that they produce a deliverable nuclear weapon. And now then all of your calculations are completely different. Now you're in a situation like with North Korea, to where you can't prevent them from getting a bomb. Now the best you could do is go on some theoretical hope to denuclearize North Korea. You could have the same situation here. And that's, of course, infinitely worse than this situation we have. Now, why would you want to go down a path that makes it infinitely worse for you? There's no rational reason to think any kind of a war would be quick, painless, or easy, and that it would complicate your effects elsewhere in elsewhere in the world. There's no upside to this, and there is profound downsides to this. And of course, there's the issue, it's illegal. Flatly, point blank, black and white, if President Trump moves down the path he's saying there, it is illegal. There are only three possibilities for legally for the President of the United States to take the United States to war. That is, number one, that there is a congressional declaration of war. Number two, that there is a congressional authorization for the use of military force, the AUMF, which was used in Iraq in 2003, et cetera. And the third one being that the United States was attacked by that foreign country. So Iran would have to attack us first, and then that way he would have the opportunity to use military force. Absent any of those three, and right now all three are absent, then there is no legal path to go to war. Now, unfortunately, this has become common, and I know people are aware of the 1973 War Powers Act. They're aware of the Constitution giving the sole war-making power to the legislative branch, but it has become so common that no one even thinks about it. Like the attack on the Houthis that the administration did a couple of weeks back, completely illegal according to U.S. law and the U.S. Constitution, didn't bat an eye. Even the Democrats didn't jump on that. They just let it go because it has become normalized. And listen, folks, if we want to get into a situation to where the United States just dismisses with the rule of law, we're in a dangerous, dangerous place, because you can't weaken the fabric of law because it suits you today. There's a temporal benefit to me today, and then we'll reapply it tomorrow. It just doesn't work that way. Every time you loosen the bands of the rule of law, they stay loosened, and then the next guy comes in, or even you come in again later, loosen them further when there's benefit to it. That is a dangerous place to be for our country, because one of these days it may have a catastrophic rebound effect. So far, like when we've used them in Syria or in Libya or in Iraq and various places, sometimes we've launched assassination attempts elsewhere, whatever, violating law, but the other side hasn't been strong enough to do anything about it, and there hasn't been any real harm to us. And so people think, okay, it didn't hurt. When my guy's in power, I like it when he has it because he can do whatever he wants, and I like to support my guy. But you can see where one of these days you go so far that now then there is a bad consequence. And even aside from that issue at all, you continue to go down this path. And now then, well, I loosen the bands of the law here. How about over here? And this one here. And you keep seeing there's no consequence. So why not try it again here too? You see pretty much then whatever's popular, whoever's prevailing, there's no more law involved. Now then there's just, well, what is there? Political constraints till the next election? I mean, how long would it be until, I know there was some concern even this last election, if the Republicans had lost, what may happen here. But you can see where either party at some point can come to the point to where the laws are no longer helping us. The election system itself, I don't like the outcome, so now I'm just going to take matters into my own hand. You see, these things have a cascading effect and a deteriorating effect. We don't want to go down this path. Right now, we're specifically talking about war and peace issues with Iran. But you see, this is a continuation. This isn't the start of anything. This is a continuation of what's been going on for decades, and it's taken us into a bad direction. And we don't want to see this. We must be a country governed by the rule of law. And that has to apply to everyone, everyone equally under the law. Nobody is above the law. Nobody is below the law. Everybody has a chance for justice. It's never been perfectly applied, but it has generally held. And has been, for the most part, something that the United States has built its foundation upon, why it became a great nation. And those bounds are coming off right now, and all of us will lose if this continues to cut off. I don't know anybody right now on the horizon who's going to stand up and do the right thing and to hold us accountable and to say we're not going to violate the law here, however much we may want to. We're going to do something about it. And of course, if it doesn't come from within the party that's in power, then it's irrelevant, because the Democrats can yell and scream all they want, just like the Republicans yelled and screamed all they wanted under the Biden administration. He wantonly violated the laws left and right. Obama did. Trump did several times in his administration. Definitely George Bush did. You see where I'm going with this. That has to come from the party itself, or we're going to go off a cliff one day. I don't want to see that. So there's a lot more at stake here than just the war and peace issue with Iran. It's something that we need to pay a lot of attention to, and Daniel Davis Deep Dive will keep holding people's feet to the fire and hold them accountable, at least in terms of information. We don't have any power, but we do have the power of our voice and our words and this channel. And as long as we're on the air, we're going to keep doing that because we're unintimidated and uncompromised. One final issue I want to point out today, too, on the other hot issue, of course, that we cover a lot, and that is the Russia-Ukraine war. Vladimir Putin today announced that they are going to conscript 160,000 more Russians for the war with Ukraine. That headline's a little bit deceptive. They're not actually conscripting 160,000 for the war with Ukraine, because according to Russian law, conscripts are not able to be used in the special military operations. They're only used for domestic purposes. They're defending their borders, etc. Some were used in the Kursk operation because that was penetration into Russian territory, and it was authorized to use there. And apparently they did just that. But here's the thing. This is the biggest one that they've ever had. I think since 2011 anyway, not the biggest one ever, but the biggest one since 2011, not even just in this war, but all the way back to 2011. And by having a larger number of troops inside Russia, that frees up more troops from inside Russia to go into the special military operations. So not conscripts, but some of the other forces. So it's an exchange. So they keep their national security border going, but they continue to advance. This is, I think, the third straight year where the in strength for the Russian army, active duty, has increased. Now it's going to be 1.5 million. I think it was 1.3 a year ago, but it has continued to grow, etc. This underscores that Russia absolutely views this war as an existential fight, and they understand that the possibility, and they're making preparations that it could go into a U.S. or a NATO Russian war. It could escalate beyond that. Read the room here. This is what Putin is saying. That's why they have the biggest one ever, because they see that they're having all kinds of trouble getting any kind of a negotiated deal, even out of Trump. You have the Ukraine side continuing to try to put all of these provisions on to try to change the deal. They're reneging on even the early parts of this partial ceasefire. None of that stuff has gone into play. And as we've been talking about a lot here of late, you had Europe that keeps talking more and more about, hey, let's expand our participation in this. Let's keep providing more and more ammunition. I think I saw over the weekend, Germany has given another multi-billion-dollar package, committed one, to the Ukraine side here. France and UK talk about this coalition of the willing. They want to move troops inside of Ukraine, etc. All of these things signal to the Russian side, nobody over there is looking for peace. They don't even want this war to be over. And so Russia's thinking, okay, you guys want to go down that path, we can go down that path. And so they are physically building a conventional military power that can take on the Western Europeans, that can take on NATO if necessary. And, you know, the first 2.5 years of this war, I kept saying all these claims that Russia's coming after you guys is ridiculous. It's just fanning the flames and making fear and making people want to support it in the West. And that was true at that time. But things started changing as we got later in, because now all of a sudden we're providing motivation for Russia to take that very action here. And that's exactly what's going on right now. All of these things that we're doing, all these actions we keep taking, signal to the Russians that we cannot be trusted, that we don't want peace, and we want to continue going down the path towards war. Donald Trump is saying that he wants to end the war. He's emphatically saying that, continues to. But you can see from the Russian side, they're saying, okay, that's great. We would love to see that happen. They do say that often, but they say Trump's not the only player here. Ukraine and Europe is. And so there have been many commentators on the Russian side, some on Telegram, some on their open public, et cetera, that say, hey, we're not going to get into a war with the United States, because they recognize how catastrophic it would be. And especially if you got into a conventional clash, you could all too easily go nuclear. But they say with Europe, it might be a different situation, because if we can't solve our security on our border issue with diplomacy, then we may have to use other means, almost to steal a page from Trump's playbook there. And so they may actually now contemplate a conventional war with NATO. And that's one of the reasons why I think you're seeing this expansion. Remember, prior to the February 22 offensive where Russia invaded into Ukraine, their total armed forces were somewhere around 900 and something thousand in active duty. Now that it's going to be 1.5. So already, instead of weakening Russia, which was an outright objective of the Biden administration, it is America, it is NATO that is weakened. And Russia is much, much stronger. I mean, they're 500,000 bigger than they were in their active duty armed forces than they were when they made the invasion here. By means of comparison, the total U.S. active army in the United States is 70,000. It's no one knows for sure on a given day, but it's less than 500,000. They have grown by that much, added onto the nearly million they had prior to it. So you see that they're getting bigger and stronger. And of course, it's not even numbers. It's never just about numbers. It's about the technology. It's about their industrial capacity, and it's about the training and experience of their troops. So they now have a huge number of extremely experienced and trained troops. And now that they're equipped, because of their internal systems are now fully operational and they can equip them with everything they need for the war, we aren't. To the contrary, we have emptied so much of our capabilities that we had prior to this war by giving it to Ukraine. Do you realize we've given over 500 million small arms rounds, machine gun bullets, rifle bullets, et cetera, to the Ukraine? That came from somewhere. We've been trying to manufacture it, but it's not a fraction of what we've actually given away. 500 million. There have been, I think, somewhere between 4 and 6 million artillery shells of various components that have been given as well. Of course, lots of our tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, air defense missiles. You know, because we've said this a lot, our ability to manufacture enough missiles for air defense is just completely inadequate to the task. So that means our inventories continue to shrink. Every time we give something to Ukraine, we're not able to offset those losses. So our net keeps going stronger. We don't have any combat experience of any of our soldiers in the current fight. We don't. We have stuff that we've done in Iraq and Afghanistan or Africa for France, et cetera. That's against people who have no Navy, Air Force, industrial capacity, any of those kinds of things, and people who can't mass firepower. Russia can. So we have created a situation and perpetuated a situation to where we don't have the capability to conventionally go on with Russia. Of course, I'm completely against all of this and think it's a terrible decision, even for the Russian side. Don't do that, because a frightened and weakened Western alliance that has nuclear weapons can be tempted to use them. Too many people on the Russian side say, oh, they wouldn't do that. We think they wouldn't risk, losing Paris or London, et cetera, for something on the eastern flank of NATO. Maybe, but maybe not too. Frightened people who don't want to give up power can make bad decisions under pressure. Don't find out. Don't go down that path, because we could get into a catastrophic situation to where you may intend to keep something in the eastern flank, but now you may bring London or Paris or Brussels into the target list in a nuclear way. And it's game over once that happens. I mean, God only knows where that could go, all of them bad to literally human ending in scenarios. We don't need to go there. But even if it just stayed conventional, even if the connection turned out to be true that they wouldn't risk a nuclear war over this and it stayed conventional, you're going to lose that too. There's no rational reason. There's no practical reason why Russia would lose if they fought a conventional fight against anybody on their border right now. And, there's lots in the West who want to say, oh, well, they can't. Look, it took them 3 years to all this stuff to Ukraine. And there's some justification to that. But what that also implies is that this is all Russia can do, that they don't have the capacity to do more. And I think that is a bad bet. I don't think it's accurate. I think that this has been, and I know people don't even want to hear this, but this has been restraint on the part of Vladimir Putin. We always talk about him being evil and Hitler and all this kind of stuff. And boy, if he could go further, he would. No, he can go further, and he may go further. But so far, he has withheld himself and kept his strong military in check that doesn't want to be held in check. We don't want to put him in a position to where he lets that leash off. That's the situation we need to be very, very careful about. And you see these two issues in the Middle East and in Europe are combined and connected because the parties are combined and connected. So we have the opportunity here right now, folks, on April the 1st of 2025, where we can say, all right, let's come back to sanity. Let's cool the war talk between Iran. Let's get back to, some kind of normal diplomacy and build up over time. Give them a reason to have some trust built up on us, get some trust building measures, confidence building measures. Let's take baby steps here, but away from war and towards the rebuilding of diplomatic possibilities so everybody can live in peace. Let's get this war in Russia off the table so that nobody else has to die, and that there's no risk of the war being escalated and going beyond its bounds. And there's no possibility of any nuclear exchange anywhere. All of those things are possible. And with sane foreign policies and normal diplomacy, all of those good things can happen today. They're still possible. We need to make sure that we don't cross any of these Rubicons in either Europe or the Middle East that could turn our worlds upside down. None of it's necessary. All of it is preventable. We'll see how it goes. Thanks very much for tuning in to us today. Appreciate you giving us your time. Be sure to note, if you're not aware, we're on podcast. I know some of you are new to our channel and you're not aware of it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict. Just type in full name, Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you'll find us sitting there waiting for you. But we appreciate you guys coming out, always value you, and we will remain unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth you need right now. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode. Daniel Davis Deep Dive.